BlazzinBob gets nothing effect. Has that one taken away by Troy Hellman. It seems like this could be.
Hello and welcome to the Overwatch League recap, a talk show focusing on the Overwatch League. I am BlazzinBob, and today I am joined by a guest that's come on once, Totemlydrunk from the Overwatch League network. What's going on, Totem?
Not too much. It's my day off, doing an impromptu guest spot. Always happy to talk Overwatch, but things have been pretty good, Bob.
Yeah. We were supposed to have Adam from Action Esports on, but I think he forgot, so we're going to have to get him on the show a different time. But, Totem, did you have anything interesting Overwatch League-wise happen to you this last week?
It's been probably a pretty quiet week. I've just been really busy trying to get things situated now that Contenders is kicking off across the globe, but Overwatch League's been good. It's been a tale of two teams for me because I have always been a Runaway fan and also a Lunatic High fan, so seeing the Titans get off to such a hot start only for a Dynasty to kind of regress and get back to some communication issues and trying to still sort out what sort of team they are, it's been very conflicting for me as a fan, so hopefully, that solar coaster with the Dynasty is going to eventually ride itself out and we could push through some of the issues that we're dealing with right now, but all in all, it's been a pretty solid week.
All right. And also, welcoming for the second week back, iplaigames. What's going on, brother?
What's up? Glad to be back. Today's gonna be a short day for me, unfortunately, because of our recording schedule. I'm gonna have to head out a little bit early, but as always, like Totem, happy to talk Overwatch League. It's been a super awesome week for Atlanta yet again. They seem to be topping it themselves every week. And I've continued my endeavor looking for other Overwatch League and Atlanta Reign fans over here in Atlanta. This week, I was at a meetup as well over in Alpharetta. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, later. But it was really cool getting to meet other fans. There's a couple of fan groups over here. I'm hoping that maybe I can unite them all so we form a giant super group. And we can be the main city for Overwatch, hopefully.
Well, why don't you just talk about that now? You said you went to a watch party. I did too, but I would like to hear about yours first.
Sure. This time around, it was at a different location. We went to Jekyll Brewery up in Alpharetta. They were kind enough to lend the venue for the Overwatch League fans to come and watch a game against Paris. Last time we had been at a different venue called Battle and Brew. And it turns out it's actually different groups sort of organizing this. The one at Battle and Brew was organized by the royal family. That's what they've chosen to call themselves. Super awesome group of people. They have a ton of cosplayers that I want to do like Atlanta Reign cosplay. So I thought that was super cool. And their crew is looking quite big. I think it was Dogman that shouted them out on Twitter the other day. But this other crew that I was hanging out with, it's called the ATL6. And shout out to my friend Carson, who's reached out for me like a month and a half ago. He wanted to get something together, and he and a group of other people kind of like helped put it together at Jekyll Brewery. And it was really cool. Very cool Atlanta fans. They're all super into it. And I just hope that, we can all just unite. We had a good few beers and a good conversation. I ended up talking more to the fans than actually watching the game. So I had to like go back that night later and rewatch the awesome rooftop grab from the Fran.
Dude, that was incredible. Oh my
right?
gosh, that was incredible.
So much style in that team.
Yeah, and
What would you say like the turnout was? Because you said you went to 2 different watch parties. Was one a bigger turnout than the other?
The Battle and Brew one it tends to be a little bit bigger just because it's closer to the city in more of a central location. Alpharetta is a little bit outside of Atlanta, kind of the adjacent cities that Atlanta has kind of like eaten up because it's grown out so much. But the turnout for this one was about like 25 people, close to 30. So it
Okay.
was still a pretty decent turnout for being so far away and retired. And granted, Battle and Brew was having their own meetup that day too, and I think their turnout was like over 50 people. So I mean, we're looking good over here.
I
Nice.
believe it was 70,
Yeah,
because
70. They might have tweeted out. Yeah.
well, they didn't tweet it out. I actually caught the latest episode of the Bird Watchers podcast.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's some,
They've been very involved with it.
yeah, they've been involved with it. They've been talking about it. So I was wondering if you had gotten to meet those guys, because I got to meet them because me and Totem are in a podcasters fantasy league with them and with a bunch of other podcast groups. And so I was curious if you got to meet the guys from the Bird Watchers, because I thought that'd be neat.
I didn't get to meet them all, but I did get to meet one, and right now I am sort of forgetting his name because I've met so many of them at this point. But yes, I did meet one of them, and he was very, very nice. Big shout out to them because they've been super involved in the community as well, especially with that little Battle and Brew crew, which is a really cool gaming bar, by the way. And now I sound like a commercial for Battle and Brew, but I mean, hey, if you're gonna put on Overwatch League events and you're gonna get all these people out, you're sure gonna get my shout out.
Definitely. And so, yeah, my week was a little crazy. I went to Washington D.C. Friday morning, and I spent the entire weekend in Washington. But Saturday night, I got to go to a watch party for the D.C. Justice, and it was really neat. There were probably about 50 people there, maybe 40. And it it was kind of they described it more as a pity party than a party, because I tweeted at Monty. Yeah, I tweeted at Monty at one point because he said clip something. I was like, hey, everybody at the Washington Justice watch party just yelled clip that. And then he came back at me with, is the Washington Justice Party ever really a party? And then Gig from highnoon.gg stood up for me to Monty, not realizing that Monty and I know each other. But then I read the tweet that Monty wrote back wrong. I read it as, I know Bob, blah, 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 instead of I know Bob, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought he thought Gig's reply was me replying to him, because Gig kind of looks like me, but it was all pretty funny. But they were great. I bet I know you didn't get to meet Labasco, but I met Labasco's casting partner, Pokemon Panda, and also another caster from broadcast.gg, Green Havoc. And so I got to meet them. I got to meet a ton of fans. It was really cool, and I'm really bummed we don't have these types of things here in Denver, and it makes me want to kind of maybe
gotta get a Denver team, dude.
Or maybe just get a watch party just for Overwatch League. I mean, there's got to be fans here. I'm just
There's
curious.
definitely fans, because I had the same thing happen to me. I kept thinking, where are the Overwatch fans here in Atlanta? And it's just that there's not usually events, and Overwatch tournaments, for example, were never grassroots in that sense. Like Super Smash, or fighting games in general have a huge community over here. And if you go to a lot of the gaming bars or kind of LANs or stuff like that, you see a bunch of tournaments for fighting games, and the community is there, and it's not hard to find. But for Overwatch, it's just hard to stumble into those groups that are playing it. But now that the localization is happening and each city is kind of getting their own team, it definitely started happening over here, and those people kind of starting out started to come out of the woodwork, basically. So it might just need you maybe starting like an event, or somebody just taking the initiative and starting the event, promoting it, and being like, hey, we're going to be televising Overwatch parties over here. And I'm sure you're going to get some sort of turnout. They're everywhere, dude. They're just, passive. You got to activate them.
You gotta get them out of their shell.
Yeah.
Well, I've had a couple different fans of different shows, ask me if I was gonna like get something going in Denver, but it just seems like a big task. If anybody knows how to get something like that going, please get in contact with me. My DMs are open. I would love to help out with something like that, but I can't run it. I've got too much on my plate at the moment, but I would definitely be heavily involved if anybody's interested.
You need to find the Guild Hall of Denver, dude.
Yeah, I know. I need to find some sort of EU sports bar, or maybe I should just open one.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Oh, just jump to the end. All right.
Yeah,
well,
at that point, you never want to leave.
Yep. Okay. Well, so we always like to start the show with thanking our recap producers Shazir and Thrill. Also, a big shout out to Slippery Snake, who upped his patronage to $5. Thank you so much. It is much appreciated. Our YouTube channel's going pretty strong. We are almost to 100 subs, and in about a week and a half, we've jumped up about 80. So keep it coming. You guys should definitely check those out. I'll be editing another one with Badosin here after we're done with the podcast, so that should be up sometime today. You can find that just by going to YouTube and searching OWL space recap. Also, pick'ems are going. I am kicking all of you guys' butts. Although Mel only missed 2 this week, so she is closing back in on me. That was pretty impressive.
Nice.
Yeah, impressive. Yeah, mine have been all over the place. Like every time I do like my pick'ems, I don't know what version of the teams that we're gonna get. So like I know I missed one day last week, and I still ended up missing like 4 other ones. So it's been very shaky.
Yep. I mean, last year we joked about good Philly, bad Philly. Well, now you could say that about like 16 of the teams in Overwatch League are good team, bad team. Like you could really say that about all of them except for like the top 4. It's crazy.
Yeah, primarily though, we're looking at the Hangzhou Spark because we don't know what the heck's going on at the time.
Or Dallas Fuel. I mean,
yeah, that too.
Although
because of the C9.
I will say my Dallas is only good on the weekends has still held true pretty good. They've won every weekend they've played, lost every weekday. So, all right,
at least they're consistent about that.
Yes, so far. I'm just hoping it's weird. They play Shanghai here again on the 8th, and I'm just like, gosh, twice in a row, and that's on Friday. So I'm a little worried, but we'll see what happens. All right, so this is kind of this episode was kind of last minute. We Mel's not here. We're just going to kind of go in and just have conversations about what's going on. And since Shazir is currently in chat, I want to move right into the first thing. Let's talk about the LA teams, and let's start with the LA Valiant. Does one of you want to start with what you think's going on here?
Well, for one, we got to talk about the OWL emotes and how wins out is win 0, which is very true for the Valiant's case. So it's a number of things for the Valiant right now. Yes, you can definitely look at, what's going on between Kuki and Custa at the main support, but a lot of their problems to me are surrounded around kind of like their ult management, and a lot of it is fallen on Kareev. Kareev has had high energy gains throughout this season. That hasn't been his issue. His issue has been his bubble management, not keeping Fate bubbled whenever he's initiating or dropping his shield, and Fate keeps getting pressured down just due to the fact that Kareem just isn't necessarily pulling his weight on that Zarya role. And in this current meta, regardless of what your energy gain is, if you're not able to finalize those kills, you're not really putting your team in a position to actually win a team fight. And it just seems like the Valiants are just kind of lost in the shuffle right now. It's crazy to think this late into the first stage that across both LA teams, they only have one win. Like, these are teams that we all thought were going to be either maybe like top 7, top 8, or kind of mid-table. And right now, they're in the bottom half of the league. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is weird.
Yeah, they're looking really rough, and I agree with a lot of the things that Totem is saying. I also think that a lot of their players are playing in roles that are just not highlighting what they're strong at. Like Agilities comes to mind, and he's been so vocal about not liking Brigitte and how much he hates playing Brigitte. Like, just go watch one of his personal streams, and he'll probably make a comment about how much he hates playing Brigitte, even though like that's what he's bound to. And we've known Agilities. We know what he can do with Genji. We know what he can do with Roadhog, heroes that have been basically banned from this meta in one way or another. Look at Space. Like, he shines on the diva, but Space was known for his dive when he was working with Fate, with
Fate,
the
yep.
monkey and the diva. They worked so well, but that is just not that necessary anymore. And what you're saying right now is more important, your synergy with your Zarya and Reinhardt. Can you keep each other alive? Can you make those pushes? And I just don't think that they're positioned really well to fight in this meta game. Not that these players are not high caliber. Like, Costa is still like a really amazing Zenyatta, but if your front line is looking shaky, if your players are not happy with the roles that they're playing, I think it's gonna show, and I think that is what's happening right now.
Well, and I agree with you guys, and I had thought that Valiant was going to take a, somewhat of a dive this season because of the loss of Sood. Everybody kind of discounted that, but I was like, dude, this is a big deal. I did not think 0-5 though. Another thing is their schedule's pretty rough. I mean, Washington Justice is probably the only one that has a worse actual schedule for stage 1. And Fate has looked bad on Ryan. I mean, Fate, great monkey, but his Ryan play has been leaving us wanting bad. I mean, I've seen him shatter at least 3 walls. Not people, walls. Like throughout multiple weeks. And I do think that in this next meta, Monkey's coming back, and that's going to be good for this team. But if they continue on this winless route, how much is that going to hurt them for the end of the year? Standings. Like, they need to at least win a couple games to. They're for sure out of the playoffs for stage 1. But if they want a chance at making it to the finals, they really need to get a couple wins to finish this stage out.
And now they're supposed to be going against some of the easier teams, because you're right. Like, their schedule was not on their favor. They actually faced a lot of the stronger teams for GOATs. That's what I mean. But now that they get a chance to play against the teams that are not as predominant in GOATs, they really got to step it up, because it's what you said. Like, if not, they're going to fall really far behind. I don't know. They're going to be a mayhem at this point.
I like how Andres didn't want to say Houston Outlaws, because that's really going to be their only chance at picking up a win this stage.
I just feel like I've been talking so much flack about the Outlaws. I just got to give them a
well,
break.
see, I never have enough of that, and Mel's not here to stand up for her team, so she can't really do anything about it. But like, honestly, with the way that the Valiant are playing, I'm not even favoring them against the Outlaws. I feel like right now, the Valiant can probably only beat Washington at this point. There's just been too many issues, and as good as Izayaki has been on that flex support role, with him being kind of at the limelight now since he's the new main flex support. His Transcendence usage has just been all over the place, where he's just popping it too early, and then he's not having it to answer the Graviton Surge. It's going to come in on the next fight, and it's just like, well, you don't have the tools at your disposal to just be throwing away ultimates like that, and then that's just causing even more fluctuation in regards to the actual ult economy, to the point where you're just digging your own grave at this point. But I will say, Bob, I mean, you mentioned we're not really seeing a ton of Monkey, we're not seeing a lot of Winston, but the Valiant aren't the only team that are struggling on the main tank role, having to play Reinhardt more than Winston. Regardless of if there's a meta shift, there's probably 6 to 8 teams that are also dealing with similar issues, except their Zarya player is actually doing a better job with the bubble management, so they're not dying as often. Although I will say, we got to see a lot of mistakes, or a lot of target prioritization on the main tank role, specifically on a match that a lot of us thought was going to be super competitive, which ended up being Eternal getting absolutely demolished by Atlanta this past week.
Yep. Well, okay. So we talked about Valiant. What's going on with the Gladiators? Do you want to start this one off, Andreas?
I think that Gladiators are kind of suffering from a similar symptom, right? Like last season, Gladiators were known as being one of the most versatile teams, one of the most aggressive teams in terms of DPS players. You had Surefour, which is just that DPS all-star, right? Like this guy can just play any DPS you throw at him. He plays it at a really high level. He might not be the number one at every DPS, but he can definitely go up against all the top DPS in the world. And you're just not highlighting that in this meta. You have other players like my Hydration, for example. Again, a player that's known for his Doomfist, for those off meta heroes that you would just catch you off guard, and he was so good with those. And now they're all bound to Brigittas, to Saryas, and they're doing a good job in it. But I just don't think that that's like their main strength. Also, their tank line has changed drastically from last season, and I don't know if maybe they've had a rough start, aligning that with their existing lineup. I don't know how the communication is going in between the team. It's one of the most mixed teams, right? Like a lot of languages in this team. Last year was Dallas Fuel, but this year Gladiators is looking like really all over the place there. So I just wonder how their internal communications and their internal kind of like dynamics work, because right now they're looking a little bit all over the place. Like I said, sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off. They definitely have the talent.
What do you think, Totem?
This is it's a hard one for me, because for me, the Gliders have been one of the biggest disappointments thus far in Stage 1, more so than the Valiant. And a lot of it, like, I can agree, like, communication is probably something to do with it, primarily just because, well, we haven't seen Bishu. Bishu has been dealing with an illness, and he was always kind of the translator for that team going back to the inaugural season. But, right now we've been seeing a ton of Void with Roar, the KDP, or Condu Panthera tank duo, who used to tank together for quite some time with one another. And Roar has just not been able to hone the aggression, and he keeps overextending, getting punished. He's not able to keep his shield up. The Discord target on him has just been the easy find, and there's just too many situations where Roar has been the first one to die, and then things just unravel at that point. And then, going back to this past week, we saw Decay turn 18. He immediately made his debut, and the first match that he was in, he looked amazing. This was when they were facing the London Spitfire. He was matching and even surpassing what Prophet was doing on the Zarya. And then fast forward to their second game of the week, and then Decay just kind of fell quiet. So it's a tale of two Decays. You have Decay, who's been hyped up to be really the biggest free agent signing of the offseason as an individual. Not to say that that was the biggest signing, because I'm sure you guys know what the biggest sign-in to me was, because I'm a Runaway fan. Yeah. But it's a lot of this just seems to be, if Roar was just able to maintain survivability, whether it's from bubble management, whether it's from just staying back a little bit more and trying to be more reactive, the Gladiators would probably look like a different team because all of the pieces are there. It's just not clicking right now. And for them to only have one win right now, it's just mind boggling to me because they're too good of a team. But I will say, like, regardless of if you're playing Surefour or you're playing Decay, I don't think there's a wrong answer between the two. But I am surprised that there hasn't been more of a rotation between the two because as soon as Decay turned to 18, Surefour's basically just been right in the pine at this point, which I know is going to agitate a lot of the fan base.
Yeah, he got to come in a little bit, and that's something that I wondered about. Like, Decay looks good, but I wonder if benching Surefour, you bench a lot of your team's communication and just, I mean, Surefour is one of the big brain players, as I call him, in Overwatch. He's someone who really understands the game, the nuances, and without him in there, I wonder if they're losing a little bit of that. Also, I don't know what Decay's English is like either, and he's also very young. I mean, he just turned 18, and you're right. He came out, and I was impressed with that first game, and then the next game he's throwing grabs like in weird spots. I don't know what's exactly going on. People were already dead when he's throwing grabs, and it was already a 4v6, and it was just a little bizarre. But what would you put Surefour back in, or even would you just, I mean, the other person just has to play Brigitte most of the time. Would you maybe put in Surefour and Decay and bench Hydration?
I don't necessarily think the issue has been hydration. I mean, so much of it is just a pressure on the front line. And, you know, they only have Pinker on a 2-way contract for a backup main tank. But if Roar continues to get decimated the way he has been and just dying first so often in these team fights, the Gladiators are going to have to rethink what the contract status of Pinker is going to be because they're putting themselves in a position where, you know, the longer you stick with this and the longer it doesn't work, the harder it is for you to dig yourself out of the grave that you find yourself in, because this is a team that, by all purposes, should be a playoff contender, and they are just not looking like it in this current meta. And, I mean, for now, like, you know, you might walk away with a win or two, but you're not making these stage playoffs, and you're just one of half of the league that are just grasping for the opportunity to switch metas to maybe be able to look better. But right now, it's a rough go for LA. It's like a tale of two cities, to be honest, but it's just one, and it's just like it's frustrating, even as someone that isn't a huge fan of the teams, to just see how much you're struggling, because we're in a situation where, you know, we had Shanghai, who, you know, we've all gone through the storyline, but Shanghai has more wins than all of LA at this point. Like, what's going on?
What is this reality we live in?
Well, moving on to a happier note, because iPlay's going to have to leave pretty soon. So we're going to jump to the Atlanta Reign, and we're going to talk about them.
Yes, baby.
I'm going to let you start it off, Andres. What do you want to say about them?
Just super happy with the performance. I think that Paris did not see it coming. They didn't know what hit him. I think that Paris was thinking that this was going to be a little closer. I thought this was going to be a little bit closer, but man, Atlanta is just coming in, firing it on all cylinders. I love how aggressive they are. Even Paris mentioned that. I think it was soon, or no, I think it was the main tank for Paris Eternal that tweeted out that he felt he had performed really bad, and he congratulated Atlanta on the relentless aggression that they had, because it was like that nonstop aggression. They would finish a play, regroup fast, let's go for the next one. The Fran just looking amazing too. Such an incredible player. The Torbjorn strategy that he's basically made his signature strategy for Ilios well that no other team is playing and that they're pulling off with success one after the other. It's almost like teams already expect this, but they still can't do much about it. And then also the flashy plays that he's doing. Right now, he's #1 on average eliminations per minute in the entire league with Zarya. So say what you want, but this kid is performing out of his mind. And not only that, but we got Daco and I think Dogman going at #3 and #4 in the league. So the team overall is just killing it right now. And let's talk about that rooftop grab. For those of you who haven't seen it, please go watch the Hollywood match from Paris and Atlanta. Point 2, as soon as Atlanta captures point #1, they use point #2 to do this amazing rooftop grab. And it's sort of hard to describe, but he basically just uses his Zarya right click to push himself on one of the roofs of Hollywood and fly from above and catch Paris with a grab that they did not see coming from anywhere.
Yeah, so basically, him and Lucio sat up on top of that platform that you have to ride the elevator up to. Lucio speeded him, and he jumped. It was 2 or 3 rocket
like
jumps.
2 hops.
There was 2.
And then pops right over the top. Paris is looking right through the choke. They have no clue that a diving Zarya is going to come down on them. Oh man, it was amazing. And something about DeFran's had some questionable grabs, like on Ilios. He grabs when his entire team is pretty much dead, right? And he and I'm like, what did he just do that for? But with the grab that he used, he goes ahead and dies, but he spawns with 60% ult charge and then has his grab by the middle of the next team fight that they do. And I'm just like, how could you do that? Like, I mean, so his questionable grab was really he was trying to just knock out 1 or 2 of their players while still like regaining plenty of his graviton surge. So he is incredible. Totem, what do you think about Atlanta Rain?
Well, I have to say, like, I'm very happy that DeFran has lived up to the absurd expectations amongst the community. Like, I never would have thought that he would have just came in and just kind of taken over. But when it comes to Atlanta, really the strongest point to me has been their main support, Mazah, who has been creating so much separation. And you saw this time and time again in this series against Paris Eternal, where he would get in, he would boop Ben Best, and Ben Best would get picked off in almost every single team fight. I think throughout this series, he was averaging like 15, 16 deaths per map, which is a staggering number as a main tank. And a lot of that was just because of the separation that Mazah was providing. And he brings this level of aggression to the Lucio play that we just normally don't see outside of like maybe Big Goose is probably the best person that comes to mind.
Yeah.
But it's been crazy. Atlanta basically have their own distinct style. And we kind of looked at Paris as being one of the better 3-3 teams in the league. And I remember, I was happy to see the Torbjorn strat work because, seeing the Molten Core definitely stops you from clumping up, which is, a pretty big staple of the Death Bowl composition. And then we go to Temple of Anubis and we see that old school season 1 defense running the Orisa on the high ground, protecting the Widowmaker. We see the Junkrat, which basically tells you, hey, if you're going to try to run 3-3 into this, you're going to eat a ton of conch mines. And that's exactly what happened right off of the bat for the Paris Eternal. And it just got to the point where everyone is so used to just running 3-3. Paris did not know how to react to that composition to the point where they didn't even attempt to even run dive until the last 20 seconds of the map. So what's really interesting about Atlanta is the fact that, yes, they are playing meta, but they're also playing off meta to the point where they're trying to force you to play something that you're not actively scrimming or practicing. And I can't think of really another team in the league right now that has that amount of flexibility or that much manpower to just kind of dictate the overall pace throughout the entirety of the series. Atlanta have their own unique style, and it's just very hard to prepare for. And with the way that the Fran tracks on the Zarya, even if he whiffs his grab, the tracking on his left click is finalizing so many kills that you really don't have to worry about it because he's basically earning a grab in almost every team fight. So it's all of these things just building up, and they've just had a very solid performance throughout this current stage.
Yeah, they have a team of all-stars, and like you said, Masa is just amazing at the Lucio. Dogman is super good at Zenyatta. You have Dako, which has impressed me quite a bit on the Diva as well, and our main tank also is just killing it. I am really curious when they go up against New York Excelsior, because you mentioned that no other team has had this flexibility. I want to argue that New York is looking very, very solid, and they're one of those teams that actually can modify their strategy quite a bit. They struggled near the end of last season to do it, but now that they're going to this new stage, their goats is looking really, really clean. And if I want to say there's another tank in this league that is really up there, is definitely New York Excelsior's. I think is uh Mano. Is that the name of their main tank?
Mano.
Yeah, Mono's the main tank. Meko is the off tank / Sombra player whenever they don't play Diva.
Mano is looking amazing on Reinhardt. So I'm really curious to see those two teams go against each other. But the friend is like Joe and Echo of DPS, man. Is like what you were saying. Like his tracking is so on point, and he's like you were saying, Bob, like a savant almost in like the way that
that's
he
what I
plays
called
the
it.
game.
The rooftop proved me right. I was like, I told you guys. He does weird stuff that you're not expecting.
And he's the number one in eliminations in the league because of that reason. He is getting those finishing blows. He sees through the chaos of the battle and he just nails the shots where they need to go. Even like when he gets super heated, he keeps his focus on the target that needs to die, and he's making sure that that person dies. And that's why his team is so good at that focus fire. You know what I mean? You always got the Fran just putting this immense pressure. He's tracking like a god, and he's lobbing grenades with any hero, with Torbjorn bullets, Zarya bullets. You need Tracer, you need like whatever you need. Like this kid can just like go track like a god with it. So I think it's hard going up against him, just like it's gonna be hard going up against somebody like Jonak.
Yeah. My biggest bummer and complaint about DeFran is that we didn't have him last year. I was calling for him the whole time. Everybody was making fun of me. I lost points on around the payload constantly for saying his name. Took him in, mock drafts and got made fun of. But in the end, I was right.
Yeah, and I had to say too, like we even got to see him play a little bit of the Tracer. I believe it was on Route 66 where they were trying to get point A and they were in overtime. The Fran comes in with the Tracer, basically fights 1v3, and Atlanta ended up taking point A at that point, which was just, it's awesome to see after like we haven't seen him on Tracer for such a long time, for him to be able to just kind of take over even in that moment when the pressure is kind of like at its peak to close out that series. So I was really happy to see that as well.
Well, and you talk about pressure. DeFran scares people, but what also scares people is how good New York is. So you brought up New York. Let's talk about them. Are they beatable? What'd you say, Andres?
I gotta head out, but yes, they
okay.
They're looking very unbeatable.
All right, we're gonna let Andreas go, and we will see him next week.
Yeah, I'll be here, guys. Thank you for having me today. I wish I could stay and talk a little bit more because New York is looking like my favorite second team. They've always been one of my favorite ones, but man, their goats is looking clean. I'm looking forward to that match, Atlanta versus New York or Atlanta versus Vancouver, because that's gonna be like, okay, who's the real boss here?
All right, well, we will talk to you more about it next week. Take it easy, brother.
Bye, guys.
2 in a row, man. Impressive. All right, so he's now matched Shanghai's win streak, so that's a plus.
All right, so New York Excelsior, do they go 7-0, Totem?
I have to look at the. I had these in the show notes for OWLN, and this
They
was one
go,
of the Fact or Fiction credits.
They're going against San
The
Francisco
Shock. Okay.
next week, and then the week after they've got oh, that's it.
They don't. They
Yeah,
don't. Shock
that's
is the
it.
last match because they're right now 6-0 at this point. So do NYXL go 7-0 for the perfect stage? Absolutely. I feel like the Shock have been one of these teams that, like the community as a whole doesn't quite know how to rank the Shock, because this is a team, and I'm not the biggest Sinatra fan, but Sinatra has been one of the standout Zarya players. But the problem is with the Shock, the way that they run their Zarya is a lot of like high ground approach. So Sinatra's on the high ground looking for the alternate fighters, looking to build his grabs that way. And in this match, like, it's a very easy way to kind of get Sinatra out of position, or just pick him off first, or have him come in late, trying to pick up the kills. And New York across the board, I know when they first started, I was like, okay, how good are NYXL actually going to be in this current meta? And then Mono has just looked like a top 2 main tank in the league. Probably the only other person that I'd argue is probably Bumper for the Vancouver Titans, who's looked really good as well. But NYXL has just really been throwing different looks where the Sombra play from them has actually been more of a highlight to me as opposed to their 3-3, because Meko has been flexing over to the Sombra. He's been isolating a lot of the Diva players, or just being a havoc in the backline, looking for the flex supports in the league. And for now, NYXL has looked like the best team in the league.
Well,
Now,
and teams that have a diva that can flex to a Sombra has been huge. I mean, that's such a big deal, and lots of teams don't have that diva that could swap to that. So that has definitely been big.
yeah, I see the Machine TV and Twitter saying that NYXL are going to lose to SF Shock. So Machine, like, I'll ask this to you: what about this matchup? On any line, do you feel like the Shock are favored in over the NYXL? Are you that confident in their main tank when Smurf has been kind of an afterthought, and then their actual main tank Super has been very shaky on the Reinhardt? I don't know how much stock value you can actually have on that front line, just due to the Reinhardt spot.
While he's typing that out, I'll kind of talk about Sinatra. Sinatra, I've not been a big fan of him either, but after we interviewed him the other day, I see that he's grown up quite a bit, because in the interview he talks about his team and his team play, and you can see it in his play as well. I mean, last year coming in, he did not look very good at all, was trying to do too much, and it seems like he's really settling in with his team and really getting a lot better at team play. But I'll let you go ahead and take Machine's response here.
All right. He says, I just feel like the Shock are going to come out hungry, big Sinatra fan, and can we argue one map, one Violet? Violet to me has definitely been a standout for that team. I'm not going to argue with that. But time and time again, and this is true for a lot of different teams, you kind of look at the frontline presence of these teams, and there are certain teams that are either winning the shield battle outright, or they have a Reinhardt player that can dictate the pace of the fight. And that is just something the Shock do not have on that front. Violet is going to be aggressive, yes, but at the end of the day, if the Shock are going to have a chance in this series, it's not going to be by running the 3-3. They're going to need to bring in Rascal. Maybe we'll start to see, the Mayflex pick, which I know that Florida Mayhem have been trying to incorporate quite often here lately to limited success. But, Mayhem is another couple of pegs below the Shock even at this point. But I feel like you can't rely on your morals are just the 3-3 to come out on top of NYXL when they have a main tank that hasn't really lost a battle against any main tank in the league right now.
Dude,
So,
I think. Oh no, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, if you're going to flex to something, it has to be the mate to try to create that separation where you can isolate Mono and try to pressure him down. That's going to be the win condition for the Shock for me. But the problem is, I don't think the Shock are actually willing to do something that is a little bit more off kilter, just because they've just tried to stick to their guns, running the 3-3, and I don't think that's going to be the right play here.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. From what I have seen, the chink in the armor that I see for NYXL is they have been beat pretty hard by the 4 DPS comp on a few different maps. And who could run that 4 DPS comp? Well, the Shock could definitely run that. You know what I mean? So coming out in something that throws them off is their best chance to win. But I think it's possible. I'll be picking NYXL in the pick'ems because, well, I'm just gonna have to. But I mean, the Shock does have a chance if they just do a little out of the box thinking. But if they try and go up 3-3 against 6 Elsier, I think they are going to fail too. Let's talk about the Vancouver Titans a little bit. I know you're probably dying to talk about them. You're wearing the jersey.
Yeah, I'm wearing my bumper jersey, actually. Not that you can tell, it's on the back. But anyways, okay, so, you know, I'm gonna bring this back to a comment that was made on one of the Owl Network power ranking videos that we did. So there's been a lot of talk amongst the community about how good are Vancouver? Like, how highly do you value Runaway as a team? And there was just a blurb. And I'm never gonna forget this because week after week, you know, we keep showing otherwise. But someone was basically like, "I'm sick of everyone overvaluing the Vancouver Titans." And here we are. You know, we're going into week number 4. Titans are 4-0 at this point. They've had one of the more dominant 3-3s. Bumper has been pretty solid as a Reinhardt, but you know, he does have those times where he goes for the flank shatters and they don't always pay out, but stat-wise, he's finding a lot of cleanup. He's leading a lot of the stat categories, whether it's damage, eliminations, Earth Shatter stuns, you know, getting the cleanup with the Earth Shatter, all of that good stuff has looked fantastic. And you also have a player like Min-Soo, who does play a pretty monster Zari, who probably, honestly, like, I mean, I know I'm a Runaway fan, but I feel like in regards to the actual Zarya players, he's kind of been one of the highlighted players that maybe hasn't really been given a fair shake by a lot of the analysts. I don't really see a lot of people talking about Min-Soo just because of how flashy Defran has been or how good Sinatra has been kind of like throughout the season. Min-Soo is kind of like fallen out of the discussion, which I find really interesting just because he's been such a staple part of this team. But I will say, like, as I mentioned earlier, it's been a really weird case where I have a love for two teams that are on really opposite ends of the spectrum. One that's been kind of a disappointment since the get-go, going back to last season to now the Titans coming in and just being like one of the best teams in the league. And it agitates me knowing like, this is what I wanted from the Dynasty last year, and we just never got it. So I'm happy at least one of my teams has been able to just come in, flex on people. And for me, it's just, it's very fitting just seeing Runaway kind of like calm the community in the sense that everyone was like worried about, well, how are they going to do? Because they don't have that sort of LAN experience in the Overwatch League, when really they've kind of like been through it all over in Contenders Korea, which, by the way, like if you guys aren't watching Overwatch Contenders, specifically Korea, I highly recommend you guys checking out Runaway's current lineup, because there are a couple of players that are Overwatch League eligible. Granted, there's only 2 of them, but their main tank is definitely one to keep an eye on for mid-season pickups. But I have to say, across the board, Titans have looked just as good as I have hyped them up to be, regardless of how much flack the community gives them for having such, a rabid fan base and people arguing about the colors.
Yeah, they were. They were. I touted them as being probably the best expansion team to come in prior to the season starting. Did not realize so many expansion teams would be so good. But I do think it's a testament to them playing so much goats prior to the season starting. I'm wondering how they're going to do when the next meta forms and how fast they're going to adapt in stage 2. But we will just have to wait to see on that. So who else should we talk about? The Fusion we talked about quite a bit last week. Let's talk about what do you think about the Guangzhou Charge, team that hasn't really gotten a lot of love from the community either, but seems to be doing pretty well.
Like, if I'm being honest, out of all the expansion teams, I actually enjoy watching the Charge the most.
I love watching Happy.
They run a lot of triple DPS compositions, and yes, you can also say that about the Chundu Hunters, but they primarily just rely on Wrecking Ball to set up a lot of their plays, which is great from a spectator perspective, but it's also terrible in the sense that it's too one-dimensional. But the Charge have really just come in. They've been working a lot of rotations with who they're bringing in and bringing out of the maps. And Happy has just looked like an overall stud. But for me, I really enjoyed seeing Hotba getting more of an opportunity to play, just because I know last season when he was with the Fusion, he had a lot of split time with Poco. And to see Hotba kind of doing his own thing again, whether it's playing the Diva, playing the Tracer, switching over to Sombra, it's just a breath of fresh air. And it's really given him an opportunity to really make himself stand out against a lot of the other divas in the league, just because he has been flexing off of the role a lot more than pretty much a vast majority of the diva players in the league. So from a spectator perspective, it's exciting. It's still really early on, and this is a very mixed roster, so they're still, working out some of the kinks. But if you're a Guangzhou Charge fan, I don't think you could really be disappointed in what they've done so far. This is a team that, while maybe hasn't looked as dominant as some of the other expansion teams, they also necessarily didn't have the highest expectations put on them by the community or even their fan base at large. And for them to be sitting kind of pretty right now with where they're at in the stand-ins, this is a team that does have that potential to break through into playoff contention. And I can't say enough good things about Shu, who I've basically taken on almost every fantasy league that I have. Just because I have been a huge fan of his, and he's just come in, and in a league that is so dominated by standout Zenyatta players, he's always kind of been in that discussion, which I am so happy to see. So all in all, Charge are looking awesome. They have a lot of high mechanical skilled players. And this is a team that's going to transition very easily into a non-3-3 meta, which is definitely going to be a plus.
Yeah, they're easily looking like they can make the playoffs. They have Gladiators next, and they have the Titans after. Even if they just win against the Gladiators, they're looking to make the Stage 1 finals. Now, someone who might not be looking to make the Stage 1 finals is the Dallas Fuel. The Dallas Fuel are really confusing right now. They're sitting at 3-2 with a bunch of other teams, but they're sitting at 3-2 with a -3 map differential because they've been 4-0'd twice. So, what do you think Dallas makes the Stage 1 playoffs?
To be honest, Bob, I would have to look at the schedule because I don't know.
Shanghai and Boston Uprising are their last 2 games.
Ooh. Okay, so I This really depends on how much you want to value Dallas going into the weekend. Because if what you're saying is true about them really only winning on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm not that confident. Now, I will say, like, the Shanghai match, if you go back, honestly, so much of that was just the fact that Dorado map completely deflated the Dragons. The Dragons should have beat Dallas this past week, and that did not happen. The dispirited aspect in Dorado has gone from contenders into Overwatch League, and for whatever reason, the C9s just tend to happen on that map, whether it's because of the door or someone, just not staying on the cart. But
that face.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where, honestly, like, I don't know if that was the worst C9 in Overwatch history, but it would definitely be one of the first two that would come to mind. So it's one of those scenes. But as Dallas goes, I feel like RCK has looked very solid on this team. OG has looked pretty good. And AKM, I've been surprised by what AKM has been doing on.
Me too,
I know,
dude.
like,
I
in
love
season
AKM,
one,
but like I was not expecting it and was just I've just been tickled by it. Like, just the only way to describe it.
Yeah, so in season one, we saw the meme portion of the AKM blade and how we kind of embraced it, and you can really tell that stuff definitely got to him, but he definitely embraced it to the point where it kind of like lit a fire underneath AKM, and he's looked pretty solid across the board. My only concern with the fuel is just the fact that after all of this time, I feel like they rely a little bit too heavily on the Sombra play with RCK, which is good against certain teams because there are a couple of teams out there that do very poorly against Sombras. I'm looking at you, Boston, and this is something that they can exploit in that series. But they rely on it more than a lot of other teams, and really the only other team that I can think of that tends to run a ton of Sombra, more so than others, is NYXL. And I'm sorry, Dallas, but
also
you're no NYXL.
London too.
Yeah. Well, London's also been a case of they're still sorting out which methods they want to run primarily because, they benched Bird Rain, they moved Prophet over to the Zarya, they looked better, but Guard hasn't necessarily been playing in all the maps either. But Dallas, I feel like Dallas has done enough where they're always going to be one of those bubble teams, and for me, a lot of it is just going to boil down to if OGE is going to get punished when he's being aggressive, because that has been one of the things that we see quite often. And really, I don't know if that's necessarily the fault of bubble management with AKM, because I don't think that's really been an issue because he's been looking pretty solid. I feel like OGE just needs to rein it in just a little bit, and then they'll be able to be a little bit more reactive and be able to adapt and overcome. But for stage one, with the schedule that they have, the Shanghai series is the coin toss, but I don't think I would favor them over Boston, primarily just due to the fact that Fusion still at this point has this level of aggression that hasn't necessarily been exposed too much, and I don't know if Dallas is going to be the team to necessarily do that.
Yeah, Fusions has been good, but Boston's got an uphill battle of their own, and they're definitely going to want to win. Shanghai definitely wants to win. Shanghai's got confidence now. It's kind of a whole different team. Like London looks like they could make it. Toronto Defiant. Let's talk about them for a second. Toronto Defiant has really looked good.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like they didn't have their flex support at the start of the season. Neko was dealing with his suspension, and now Neko's back. And I know Aid was their main support player, and he was playing flex support when Neko was out, and Aid was putting up some absolute monster numbers. And now we're kind of in a situation where Well, now they bring in Roki as the main support. Like, that's their final form, so to speak, or at least that's how they tweeted it out on Twitter. I don't know if that's the right move for Toronto, just with the way that Aid was playing. But really, Toronto has been playing out of their damn minds, and it's really surprised a lot of us. They definitely surpassed my expectations because this was a team that kind of going in, I was like, okay, this team, if I was to rank everyone going into the season, I probably had Toronto at like a 13, maybe 14. And with the way that they have been playing, they're looking like a top 6 team in this current stage, which is not something that I ever would have expected. And a lot of it, to me, comes down to the play of Ivy. Ivy has been an absolute stud. Envy has been putting up absolute ridiculous kill to death
Envy's
ratios
looks good,
on the Diva, which I'm so happy to see because you have so many of these players right now that moved from one team to another in between the seasons. And Toronto, they got Neko from Boston. They got Envy from LA Valiant. And that's no fault to Envy at all, because really the only reason Envy didn't see playtime was because of Space. Like, Space turned 18, and then he just had a stranglehold of that Diva spot. And you can't really fault the Valiant for that. But for Envy to get away from that Valiant, to see this opportunity to play, he's definitely made the most of it. And I don't think you can say that necessarily about a lot of these Diva players that have moved to other teams. Because for me, like, the name that would be on the opposite end of that spectrum, I would probably be Zephyr, who went from the Dynasty to the Mayhem and has kind of been already forgotten about because he's already been benched because of their signing of McGravy.
Yeah, well, let's talk about we're running a little short on time, but I want to talk about the Mayhem and the Justice before we're done. So let's talk about the Mayhem sitting at 1-4. Started apply for the very first time this week. We actually got to interview him right after his match. You can check that out on YouTube. But what do you think? Like, I mean, it looks like Bare Hands is getting a good team formed, but they're just not quite ready yet from what I've seen.
Florida is probably what I expected them to be. And that is a bottom of the barrel team. I hate to say it because, like, BQB has looked very solid on
Yes,
Zarya.
he has.
But Mayhem have kind of like put themselves in a position where, and here's the thing that surprised me, is the fact that they've been running to Vic primarily in every single map, which is not something that any of us expected. So this is a team that is mostly Korean. Their communications have been in English. And there are a lot of other mixed teams that have been trying to do that as
A
well.
lot.
But which is weird. I mean, I can understand from the perspective that there are going to just be certain words that are going to be more easily translated to English rather than going from English to Korea. But one way or another, it's very hard to pick up another language. But for Vic to kind of see a lot of play when a lot of us were just like, he's just going to be right in the bench. He's going to be driving a bus, grabbing kebabs, whatever the Mayhem had in store for him. And that's not been the case. And Apply, who he's on a 2-week contract. And, he made his debut this last week. We saw McGravy, who was also a recent sign-in from Dallas Fuel's academy team in Team Envy, who honestly should have been signed a while ago. I don't know why it was so last minute, but Zephyr's just been struggling, and McGravy could be what this team needs to finally start to build some momentum. But across the board, you basically have a lot of these players who either moved from another team or necessarily weren't the strongest aspect of whatever team that they came from. And when you're trying to like mold a team based off of that type of synergy or like these secondary characters, so to speak, I don't know if you're going to be, looking like a solid team, or if it's just going to be like a Picasso type mess where everything's just all over the place. Because right now, the Mayhem were like, okay, we're going to start to Vic. We're going to run a lot of May on Kings Row. We'll see how that works. Hasn't really worked out. They're getting good isolation, but they're not closing out the map.
Yeah, it's worked out okay-ish.
But it's not something that you can rely on because you're not always getting the separation that you need. And, when you're not running the Diva, the Sombra usage has proven to give better results. So I don't understand why they keep trying to go to the well with the Mei so many times, because right now it's been okay, but it hasn't necessarily been a breakthrough moment for the Mayhem. But I do have trust in bare hands. It's just a matter of, are the Mayhem always going to kind of be this 18th through 20th ranked team, or is there going to be a little bit of life in them? And I'm hoping that at some point they'll get there, but I do not put much stock value in the Mayhem, even if they do make another move. But it's been a rough ride still, if you're a Florida fan.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that they get something going too, because they have like one of the best fan bases and one of the best fan clubs in the Chaos Crew, and I mean they're just dying for some success. And do you think you did mention Apply being on the 2-way contract? Do you think that they play him next week, because he's got his 2 games in now? So if they play him next week, that keeps him Overwatch League and no contenders.
Bob, I actually missed the Mayhem Academy match last night, so I don't even know how they feel. I'm gonna quickly pull up over.gg to look at that roster, because I know they did announce all of the contenders stuff here very recently. Because if they have someone else at that position, that would be a pretty clear indicator of what their plans are going to be.
Good call.
Moving forward. Looks like Mayhem Academy did pick up their first win. And they did sign another flex support. Now, granted, I don't know if I should use flex support, because really it's the DPS players playing. But this is a team that they went out, they picked up Mangachu to be their flex support. So that definitely points to the fact that Apply is going to be someone that is probably going to see more time in Overwatch League than actual contenders. So I would assume, based off of the current roster, them having multiple people at that position, that Apply is going to be sticking with Overwatch League and not filter down to contenders. And that's the thing too, like there's been so much talk about contracts with the 2-way players, and honestly a lot of us can't make heads or tails of it, because they're like, oh, you lose your contenders eligibility if you play more than 2 matches. Well, does that start at 2 or does that start at 3? Like the wording isn't like necessarily precise.
I get what you're saying. I think it's 2 total. Start of your third match. Okay. Done. Right. That's the way that I read it. But yeah, we'll just have to see. I hope that Apply gets to play, because he seems like a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, if I had to put money on it, I'd say he does not play in contenders at this point.
All right, since I was at the Washington Justice Party, let's talk about the Washington Justice. So just coming out of the gate, I think Janice is not looking good. I think he has been overextending. He's looked pretty shiny. Would you agree or disagree?
Oh man, Washington is a thing. Like, I honestly don't know how to value, primarily just due to the fact that you look at the strength of schedule, and this is not the kind of welcome you want in the Overwatch League. Justice have the toughest strength of schedule out of all the teams. And I don't know if I'd say that necessarily paints themselves in like the worst light, but it doesn't necessarily give you a lot of opportunity to see growth early on. We saw Stratus make his debut here recently, but Giannis has looked okay. Sansim was one of the more questionable pickups during the offseason, and I do not have much stock value in their flex tank position right now, but Corey, to me, is feast or famine still. And that was always the case over in Contenders North America. And if this team is going to look good, a lot of it's going to have to fall on Corey, and I'm not seeing it right now. And I don't know what it's going to take. I know there was a lot of talk about budgets and Washington, and maybe they went for the lowest stock value players because they didn't want to spend that much money. I don't want to read too much into that.
The Twitter stuff with Fusion was pretty golden though, where it's like, bud, we ran out. We were gonna talk some smack, but we ran out of budget.
Yeah, that to me was honestly one of the spiciest tweets that we have seen this season.
It was great.
Which was fantastic, but it's hard not to think about the supposed budget when you look at that lineup, because they don't necessarily have that star caliber player on this lineup. You know, you have Guido on the flex support line, who was really shaky when he was playing Zenyatta whenever Dynasty benched Rio Jehan. Giannis has always kind of been seen as the NYXL map throw pick. So it's hard to really like distinguish where he is as a main tank, but when you're a team like the Justice, who have been winning the lowest percentage of team fights and also initiating less overall team fights per 10 minutes, it does not put you in a position to win games. And I know on the Overwatch League website they have a chart or like a graph, and it was looking at, you know, the team fight potentials, and Captain Planet was the one that did this. I highly recommend you guys go check this out. But if you look at the graph, you will see that Washington is really so close to being off of the actual graph. And like everyone else is kind of like middle of the pack, or NYXL and like Vancouver are at the top. So go check it out. And I promise you guys, if you just look for Washington in the lower left corner, it will make you laugh, because it's so distinguishable of a differential between the 20th ranked team and the 19th ranked team. So it really kind of puts things in perspective.
Yeah, and they're currently 0-4. Their last games are against the Seoul Dynasty, the Paris Eternal, and the Florida Mayhem. Now, the Dynasties looked shaky, and Mayhem's definitely looked shaky. Do you think that Washington Justice can pull out at least one win before the end of Stage 1?
Hold on, I'm responding to Bob really quick. Okay, so looking at the schedule, let's see, Washington,
Seoul, Paris, and Mayhem.
You know, Mayhem are really the only option here. I don't think you could favor Justice against any other team. Dynasty, as shaky as they've looked, I feel like that aggression is just going to steamroll them. Eternal, you know, they're hungry to get a little bit of redemption after what Atlanta did to them after getting styled on. And Florida, you know, Florida's a very up and down team who, for more times than not, you know, they're on the downswing. So if you're looking at a potential win, it might be that. But honestly, at this point, Washington, I feel like, is going to go 0-7. Mayhem have looked pretty decent, at least on their flex positions. Like, I feel like Hakupen has looked pretty good. He's put up some pretty solid numbers across the board, even if he's not like a top 8 Zenyatta. McGravy looked pretty good in his debut this past week. And, you know, main tank position is kind of the toss-up here. So if Giannis can come in and kind of dictate the pace and maybe actually initiate a couple more fights, and Corey can finalize some kills, Justice might be able to scrap it together. But honestly, if I was to make a pick'em on that one, I'd say Mayhem will likely take that one 3-1. So I'm predicting 0-7 for Justice.
Sorry, Justice fans. Met a lot of you guys. You guys are great, but I said it at the watch party. This is the time that you need to support your team the most. These guys are hurting. I mean, it's hard to put yourself in their shoes, what you feel when you haven't won anything. But I grew up playing sports, and I was on some really good teams over the years and some really bad teams. And it hurts when you're losing so much and trying so hard. So definitely throw your support out to Twitter, wherever you do your thing, and just hopefully they can get it together. But so I'm just going to go over a few things here real quick, closing out. something I want to remind everybody of is that the games are kind of a little different here in week 4 and 5. Thursday and Friday, there are only 3 games per day, and then the normal 4 games on Saturday and Sunday. Week 5, 2 weeks from now, there's only Saturday and Sunday games. So keep that in mind when you're planning on what games you're going to watch and all of that. So the week 5 ones are because so many people have week 5 bye weeks. So that's going to be another thing to watch for fantasy play. Fantasy play is going to be very interesting come week 5. So you might want to look into that. Maybe do some roster changes early in preparation for that. What else did I want to go over? Should I? No. I think we covered it. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Please join our Pick'em League. We'll be like basically doing stage stuff. So if you didn't get in for the first stage, make sure you get in before second stage. The link will be in the show notes, or you could go to highnoon.gg, click at the top right on leagues, and we are one of the featured Pick'em leagues there. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at @OwlRecap. If you want to say something a little bit longer, you can send your emails to contact@owlrecap.com. If you'd like to join our community and the Omnic Lab community, you can join that by typing discord.me/OmnicLab into your web browser of choice. We stream live normally Monday nights, not today, but normally Monday nights on twitch.tv/OwlRecap. Shortly after, that version is pushed to YouTube as well. You can find our YouTube and our new player interview section by going to YouTube and searching OWL space recap. Lastly, how can you support the show? Well, you can listen like you're doing right now. Thank you so much. You can tell your friends. You can go to a watch party and tell everybody about it there.
Yeah, shout from the rooftops too.
Yeah.
That helps.
Spread the word. Start spreading the news. I'll recap today. So then you could also go on iTunes or Stitcher has them too. Leave us a 5-star review. Maybe put us on Reddit. Whatever you want to do to just spread the word would be appreciated. If you want to go one step further, you could join Thrill and Shazir and Slippery Snake by going to patreon.com/OwlRecap. And for just $1 an episode, you can make a difference in this podcaster's life. All right, Totem, where can we find you?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, Bob. I'm on way too many things, but primarily I'm on Twitter at Totemlydrunk, and of course, if you guys have listened to really any Overwatch podcast, you've probably seen me on either Heroes Never Die, who we're actually recording episode number 150 tomorrow night. That will be Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/OWLN show. But of course, I do Overwatch League Network, OWL by the Numbers, which you were on, which is our fantasy Overwatch League website or podcast. We also have Overwatch Recall, which is our content hub where you can find a listen of really any Overwatch-related content, whether it's general Overwatch, esports, fantasy, Overwatch League team-specific, all that good stuff. And we are launching a new Contenders podcast, which I announced last night, so look for Hack the Planet in Overwatch Contenders podcast here, hopefully within the next week.
Yep, and also a big shout out to Row and Rel Maintenance who had us on their episode this week and interviewed us. It was a great time. We appreciate you so much, Row. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Blazin_Bob. That's BLAZZIN_BOB. Thank you very much for coming, everyone. We love you. Good night or good afternoon. I'm used to saying good night, but good afternoon.
Yeah, just make sure you don't host OWN show after this because we're not live.
Well, we will be doing OWL by the numbers. What episode are we on? Is it 6 or 7?
I think we're at 7. It's so hard, Bob. It's so hard to keep track. I'm on too many things.
Yeah, we'll be doing that tonight, and fantasy's getting pretty spicy. I'm sure Ed's gonna love talking smack on me after we were both 2-0, and now I'm 2-1, and he's 3-0.
He's out tonight, so you don't have to worry about him.
Oh, bummer! I was excited about it. All right, well, thank you everyone so much. We will see you later.